Well, good evening.
Good evening.
How are you doing? Okay?
Yes.
I just got from Singapore, and I was in Thailand. My monastery is in Canada, near the city of Ottawa. So it's a large monastery, but a small monastery. So we have 160 acres of land, but we only have maybe 10 people resident. Lots of space. Lots of animals, we have deer and bears, and porcupines and skunks and weasels. It's all manner of wildlife. It's very, very wild place. So what to talk about? Maybe we should talk about Buddhism? Would that be good? It's a big bear story, I'm not the most fun. Well, one thing, how do you go from anger to compassion? How do you go from fear to fearlessness? How do you go from self-disparagement to self-compassion? What's the kind of, how do you transit life's, how do you transition or move or learn about the kind of dark sides of your psyche, dark sides of your inner world, and move towards that which is bright? That to me seems the work of human spirituality. And I've been at this game for 50 years, so I've suffered a lot. And by my own character, I had lots of suffering, lots of fear and social anxiety. I get very depressed at times, plenty of anger, lots. So lots of good material to work with. And the thing about my teachers was that their primary concern for my practice was because they knew I was good-hearted and diligent, and I was in the boundaries of monastic life. The primary concern was that I think I understood the difference between awakening to the way things are and judging the way things are. So I can be very harshly judgmental about my inner world. They shouldn't be angry, they shouldn't be fearful, and that kind of judgmental language. But that wasn't really what they were pointing to. They weren't asking me to be a perfect monk. They said, no, first of all, you have to, I use the language, make conscious the way things are. And the reason I use that kind of language, make conscious the way things are, because to me it's a way of talking about awakening to one's inner world rather than trying to get rid of or become or attain or analyze or fix. And that kind of primary consideration, I think, is essential to liberation. Because if we don't wake up and notice the way things are, then we tend to be reactive. And we're reacting to the way things are. From what? From our maybe scriptural readings, we read about what we should attain, or maybe what our parents said what we should be, or what culture said we shouldn't be. So as a monk, I could certainly read text and say that Metta Dhamma is that I love all beings in all directions forever. And then the reality was I was annoyed at the next monk. And I was annoyed at myself for being annoyed. And that's real life, isn't it? It's the kind of like idealism is easy. I can read about Metta Dhamma and how wonderful everyone is, but I'm not getting along with anyone. So idealism is a kind of trap if you attach to it. Goals are good, to have a sense, okay, I've got some anger issues. I get angry, I get annoyed at people, and I want to work on that. And the Buddha's vision is a very compassionate vision and a very beautiful vision. But that vision I can hold, I'd like to go in that direction, but I'm here now. I'm with this annoyance, and this anger, and this fear, and that to me is what awakening means. Awakening to the way things are. From that kind of sober, honest perspective, then I can work. And to me, that's what Satchitabhama would be. The Satchitabhama would be a truthfulness of what's going on in my own heart, rather than, Satchitabhama means also means not lying. I think we all do that. Hopefully, that's self-evident. But really being honest about what you're feeling and making it conscious is the pathway to liberation. So if in the early days I didn't like a monk, I didn't like a few monks, and I wasn't getting along with him, then my first priority would be, first of all, right speech and being a decent human being. And I can do that. Well, once it's in place, I have to make conscious that, no, there's a feeling of disliking here. And let that feeling be known. So I learned to say, make conscious the feeling of disliking, which is different than trying to fix the feeling of disliking. It's different than analyzing yourself. It's different than judging that, oh, no, shit, I meant that. It's simply awareness. Right? Now, once that is in place, then the kind of purification of mind can take place. So when I can know annoyance as an object, rather than be the subject, that's what we call sakkaya-ditthi, personality view. We're going by that. When I feel annoyed at this monk sitting here, and he's got a bigger mango than me or something like that, and I believe in annoyance, then I start thinking critical thoughts about him. He's a slob, he's sloppy, he's not a really good monk. That's sakkaya-ditthi. I'm taking it personally. The other way is, shouldn't feel that way. He's a monk. He's a noble being. But I hate him. It's a monk. Shouldn't feel that way. That's also taking it personally. Right? Both sakkaya-ditthi. Much of the middle way is, annoyance feels this way. It's just this way. And what do you do? What do you do when you make that statement? That annoyance becomes an object. Before that, you're a fool, I'm a fool, I'm a subject. And that's what we mean by letting go. Letting go doesn't mean that you don't experience defilements and undecided and different kinds of negative things. It's that you no longer identify with them. It doesn't mean it's not there, and that's one mistake people sometimes make in the language of letting go. They unfortunately perceive letting go meaning you don't have the feeling. So when you have a feeling, I'm finding it hard to let go one day. No, letting go is about self-view. That's what it's really about. Because the anusari, or the latent tendency, say in this case to annoyance, it's not really, I'm not intending to feel that. If I'm intending to hurt someone, then I probably wouldn't be in this gathering. If I really was intentionally evil and cruel, I wouldn't be in this room. I'd be doing whatever I'm doing. So usually in this kind of community, we're pretty honest. We really don't want to hurt people. And we're pretty sincere. So these negative things that come up, we don't do it willfully. And the way I always joke, I say, okay, how about this? Tomorrow at 3 p.m., let's do annoyance. And then let's say at 4:30, let's do loving kindness. And then at 7, we'll do fear. It doesn't work that way. Annoyance comes when it comes. You don't wake up in the morning and feel your counting with your emotions. You're tired. They just come up. So they're not self. They're not who you are. But you do have responsibility for them. So the arising of something, I would say, is resulting karma. Not the karma of past lives, but the result of childhood conditioning, the way your parents brought you up, maybe the way your elder brother beat you up. All kinds of things condition us. So then as we reach adulthood and we become contemplative and reflective, now these things come into consciousness in a way we usually become more aware of before maybe we just sort of follow it. So that's why I say the arising, let's say in this case of annoyance, it's not my fault. It's not like I came here to hit someone, it just arose. So it's some kind of karma. But it is my responsibility in this, and it's individual. My annoyance is not your annoyance, and my fear is not your fear, my love is not your love. So, but I am responsible, because if I don't pay attention to it, of course, it dominates my mind. So I think that's important to get the difference between guilt and self-disparagement as opposed to responsibility and right thinking and right action. Because if we just hang around in guilt and self-disparagement, that's devastating. And it's also sakayaditi. So hating yourself for being annoyed is avijja, is destructive. Self-compassion is the way. So once you get that difference, what the awakened mind is, rather than the perfected idea of coming mind, you know that emotions will come which have a momentum of negativity. Then you start to see the whole emotional world and all the ego that manifests around negative emotions, you see them as objects. Now once you see something as object, then you're beginning to realize anicca. When you're the subject, like, this one is terrible, I hate him, I'm terrible, I hate myself, then it's not an object. It's not an anicca, anatta, it's self-hate. Right? Once you see that in any condition, you say, oh, this annoyance is this way, then it's actually an object. And once you start to see that it's an object, you begin to liberate it from consciousness. It comes up into consciousness, and it has a life. It has a life. So that's when you understand the huge importance of patience and wise reflection. So certainly that was my experience. I had all kinds of fears and anxieties coming up into mind, and one person would say, well, my intuitive reaction is to get rid of it. Meditate to get rid of it. But that was still, the Viradhammo. So Luang just kept saying, oh, welcome to go into situations where you feel like social anxiety or fear, and that's right. And so, like, or being annoyed at someone, go to the person you're annoyed with, not to forgive, not to ask for forgiveness, but to feel hatred. That's counterintuitive, isn't it? So Luang would say, don't just hang out with the monks you like, hang out with the monks you dislike. No way. Wrong. This is hard enough for me. But he was right. Because we weren't going to fight. We were always civilized with each other. But yeah, to kind of be with someone who you find it hard to get along with, and then not create a person around you. This is just a feeling. This is just big enough. This is just some car, whatever language you like to use around it. Then what happens? Well, the annoyance comes up in the consciousness. Now it's known as an object. And what happens is no longer fueled with sakayaditi, with ego, with thinking. It's just no, it feels this way. And then the language of liberation is be patient, not be no mind, don't go there, it can change. All that language is the perspective of objectivity. Whereas the language of ego is subjectivity. Shouldn't be this way, you shouldn't be that way. So with objectivity, the manifestation is some kind of vipakkha karma, but then you no longer feel it. The word upadana means attachment, but it also means fuel. It's actually a very good word, because you can see let's say if I feel annoyance, and I believe in annoyance, then I attach to it, attachment, but also I fuel it for the next round of annoyance. Whereas if I'm not doing that, I'm just witnessing annoyance as an object, then its energy begins to cease. Not because I'm getting rid of it, because I'm allowing the fuel to burn out, the fuel of the Dhamma. And so Nibbana has that kind of connotation of coolness. But what does that take? It takes a lot of patience. And a lot of honesty, I would say, right? It kind of like such a bar, this is my responsibility. It's not his fault, right? It's my responsibility. But that's not blaming. Blaming is really not that. So as one does that, then the mind begins to just feel more cool. Be it issues of fear or but like one very difficult thing is self-doubt. We can have a lot of kind of, am I up to this? Am I good enough? Do I look good enough? Or I don't know, and maybe not. And that's a very insidious kind of suffering. And the mind just keeps muttering away, and they're not up to it very well. No, you're good enough. So that's actually much more difficult than annoyance. Annoyance is kind of easy because it's got some juice in it, whereas something like self-doubt just kind of creeps up on you. It's just kind of living in your consciousness with thought, and it's obviously wrong thinking. So the way of diagnosing all of these problems is I thinking, I'm growing up, or I'm making, my making. So when the mind is producing a lot of ego thinking, and that really don't believe. Just don't believe, because it's very believable. And so then, if that's my particular challenge right now, to see self-doubt as an object. And that's when we talk about moha or avijja, those kind of characteristics, that's what's manifesting. And that's actually much more difficult than something that has a lot of energy like fear. Fear is very visceral, you can really know it. So if you're monitoring your inner world, and you're looking at the whole creation of self through thought, the more and more just don't believe it. I don't care, Mama. You can whisper it in my ear all you want, but that kind of idea. So all the time, what we're doing is we're developing objectivity. Subjectivity is when we talk about our social relationships. My responsibility to you, your responsibility to me. Social justice, ecology, vinaya, that's where subjectivity is important. Both are important. I'm a bhikkhu and I have these responsibilities, and you have yours, familiar responsibilities. But in terms of liberating the mind from suffering, we're not, what we're seeing is that the flow of consciousness can be known as an object. I can know fear, I can know anger, I can know love as objects. And this is the reason we can be free. If I didn't have that capacity to know, I would just be that. When fear was there, I'd just be fearful. When anger was there, I'd just be angry. So there'd be no way out. Buddha says there is a way out. And the way out is that there's the unconditioned, the uncreated, the unoriginated, the unborn, Nibbana, the deathless, the harbor, the island, peace, right? We have all those lovely words. So by beginning to see the flow of consciousness as objects, you're seeing them as anicca dukkha anatta, correct? But what also hopefully is happening is you're noticing that there is something unchanging, and that's awareness. As long as your attention is open to the objective, you're always absorbing into change, either through emotions or through ice cream, whatever you want to absorb into. Your attention is up all the time. Once you start to see this flow as objective, this is an object that comes and goes, it arises and ceases, it begins and it ends. Just intuitively, you tend to, as a contemplative, you ask yourself, the Buddha said is the unchanging, the unoriginal, the unborn. So what's that? Just intuitively. And then your mind turns, and the mind goes beyond. And you begin to intuit that your liberation is not an object, it is awareness itself. And that is very much beautifully given by Luang in his formulation of the Four Truths. You've probably heard it, but it's a good one to repeat. I repeat it many times a day. So you know that the normal formulation of the Four Noble Truths is suffering, its cause, attachment to craving, cessation, nirodha, relinquishment of craving in the past. The Lomo doing in verses, the Buddha says, the mind going outside is the cause. The result of the mind going outside is suffering. The mind knowing the mind is the path. The result of the mind knowing the mind is the end of suffering. Do that again. Do the end. So the mind going out. So, monkey, poor guy, is eating too loud. And annoyance arises because I'm a speaker for Vinaya. We should be quiet. So passionately, monkey starts chomp, 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 very loud, and spoon rattling. Annoyance arises. And where's the annoyance going? It goes out to monkey. Shut up. Right? The mind going out is the cause. The result of the mind going out is suffering. And then I notice, my annoyance is this way. The mind knowing the mind is the path. The result of the mind going out is the end of suffering. Doesn't mean the annoyance ends. Because the annoyance is still a tendency, a habit. But at least now, there isn't the grasping of it. And with the mind knowing the mind, the tendencies towards annoyance can slowly cease. So if I'm peaceful. And it's a very good model, actually. It's not theoretical. You can actually notice that all the time. The mind going out is also going out into any thought. Because a thought is an object, as is that clock. That's a visual object. A thought is an emotion is an object. And they all arise and cease in awareness. So, one of the questions I ask is awareness in the body or is the body in awareness? See what I mean? Like, put it this way, is awareness in the brain? Or is the brain in awareness? Now, if you play around with perception of presence, I could say that the clock is over there. It's true. Because there's perception of spatial perception and depth and color. But I could also say that whole experience of spatial perception and clock is in awareness. I can say that too. And when you develop that perception, you start to develop a perception of conscious space, aware space. And you begin to see that that's a kind of helpful way of seeing objects coming and going. Because usually we so identify with our emotions and our bodies and all the rest of it that we believe that's who I am. But what about other things? What happened to that? And so this way of perceiving that actually a mood arises in awareness, rather than I'm someone who is experiencing this thing called annoyance. It arises in awareness. So what you do in this kind of language or contemplation, you start to emphasize awareness rather than the objects of awareness. Usually we're either, but even meditation can be so focused on an object that we forget, well, what's the point of it? Are we just trying to get the perfect object? There's no perfect object. Are we just trying to hold on to objects so that other objects don't come in? That can't work either, because you can't hold objects that are changing. So you start to use objects to actually look at awareness itself. So I can hear the air conditioning. Right? I can listen to that, and I can say the air conditioning is over where I'm hearing. Right? I can do that, or I can just sit and let sound come to me. Right? You do that, and then I can change the sense going. I can just squeeze my hands. That's another sense going. I go back and forth. I can toggle. There's sound, and I can perceive change. I can say, with sound, what's the changing nature of sound? I'm not choosing the sound. I'm not going after the object of sound. I'm just knowing sound coming to me. And I do that with hands or the breath. Oh, and hands feel this way. And go between the two, perceive change, and then I ask myself, what's unchanged? And you can do that right now. You can listen and feel, listen and feel, and you see, actually there's awareness of unchanged. And that's when you start to emphasize awareness rather than objects of awareness. And to me, that seems to be the pathway, for me at least. That's the door to the deathless, the unconditioned, the uncreated. Because awareness doesn't have, awareness isn't relation, right? Awareness isn't vanilla. Awareness, it's not old. Taking the adjective around awareness, it won't fit. Awareness doesn't get COVID. Preferences, like, I prefer cool to warm, yeah, but that's an object. Preference is an object in awareness. Does awareness prefer? It doesn't compute, does it? It doesn't make sense. So as you sort of, in a sense of taking refuge in awareness, then this is what Buddha Sarangachami means to me. And as you know, Dharma is Dharma just as it is. Like this room now feels this way. That's Dharma. You can define it as an Ishtitanata or in the realm of Ichisamapara, you use all that language. That's language. Language is pointing to something. And so when you start to just do that, this is like it is. It's like what Savannah was saying, it's like this. And you're silent. You're silent. Just know. Then you start, I think, get into the more contemplative ideas of sadhana. Buddha knowing Dharma. Buddha Sarangachami, Dhamma Sarangachami. Not as cultural piece that we do, which is good, but actually as experiential. So when I just listen, and I start to emphasize awareness rather than sound. The way I like to teach that is to make conscious sound. Let sound come to you. And then that emphasizes awareness for me. And then, once you play around, like what I do is I usually play around with a very simple sense base, like sound. Sound very simple. Emotions are complicated. Much more complicated. But the principle holds. So then, if you've actually trained in being awareness itself, rather than focusing on objects, see what I mean? I hope you get what I mean. And if you actually train like that, then when an emotion comes up, you can be conscious that there is the emotion of anger, but there is also non-anger, which is awareness. Awareness isn't anger, awareness knows. There is the knowing. And then you see, even within like an emotional situation, which is difficult, you start to take refuge in knowing. Oh, and knowing feels this way. And then try to get rid of it. You know, this is true refuge. Then all the fears, and they begin to really cease, because now your happiness and your well-being is no longer dependent on objects. Because your happiness now is grounded in awareness itself. And that does not depend on objects. It doesn't depend on, like when I go to Canada, it will be cold. It will not be hot. But awareness, does awareness depend on hot or cold? What happens when the kind of key laces and that start to really fade away from the mind, what becomes very obvious is the marvel, let's say just the marvel that the human consciousness begins to manifest as love. Well, it's magic. I don't know why it should be that way. But it manifests quite naturally as the Brahmi Haras. Like all of us, when you're not caught up in our own dramas and not egotistical, you're somewhat looks like they're struggling, you can walk to them and say, how can I help you? That's love, isn't it? Or if a little child comes up to you with a little drawing that they made, you say, oh, that's beautiful, I love that. So the natural manifestation of a heart which is liberated from hatred, religion is love. To me, that's magic. Why? It could have been something else, I suppose. I don't know. But that's because we're no longer alienated from each other. Fear is alienation. Well, I don't know about you. And you got hair, I don't have hair, and I don't know. Fear, social anxiety, anger, greed, all of those are very alienating. They're very low in normal places. And then once those fall away, then what is left is communion. You're still streetwise. Like we have bears in the monastery, we don't hug the bears. So we're not stupid in that kind of way, we're streetwise. But so the Brahma Viharas will manifest. And how did Brahma Viharas really start, let's say? And I started the talk by saying, how do you transition from annoyance to compassion, say? Well, I think the Brahma Viharas started with acceptance. When I accept the feeling of annoyance, it's actually the beginning of the Brahma Viharas, because that is what metta is. Metta accepts all things, rejects none. So in my inner world, when I say, in an accepting way, in a mature way, I say, self-hatred feels this way. And I accept, self-hatred feels this way. Then the next step is acceptance, which is the beginning of metta, which is the beginning of the Brahma Viharas. If however I get annoyed and then I judge myself, I shouldn't be annoyed, that's dosa. It's not Brahma Vihara. It's aversion. And it might feel really good. I hate myself, and I hate myself. I hate myself. It's the same thing, right? So at some point you say, hatred feels this way. So it's not a smarmy overlay of metta on top of the actual material of hatred, because that's dangerous. If you suppress anger with some, you can move to a different mood, undoubtedly. But if I'm experiencing some really volatile emotion, and I try to stuff that all down with some perceived loving kindness, that's refreshing. Well, that's not a healthy thing. If I make it conscious, what am I doing? Wow, Viradhammo, you're really suffering. Maybe you're free from suffering. Good. That's a good statement. But it's not repressive, it's in full consciousness. Then sure, after a while, as the more volatile energy of a kilesa falls away, then it's just a bad habit of mind. And then you say, I won't go there. Maybe we won't happen. But there's a progression here. It doesn't just happen overnight. So the kind of the use of the Brahma Viharas for me would be when the mind has a chance and it's not overloaded with stress and so on, do the Brahma Viharas alone, do generosity alone, do sila alone, right? But when negative material comes up, don't be afraid of it. It's not who you are, but you do have responsibility for it. You let it be conscious. Let it be conscious, just the way it is. And my first years of monastic, it was a lot of negative stuff. And my teacher just said, be moral. Don't kill your fellow monks. Parlati, but that's a very good idea. But be honest, you feel this way. And live within the boundaries of the Vinaya, and then you'll see. So my teacher just keep patient. Ajahn Chah, I'm joking about this, but that's what he said. You just got here. You haven't trained your mind. You want to be a Buddha. He says, give it 5 years, and you'll probably feel a bit better. 5 years? You have some secret formula. It's not that way. So if you're in for the long haul, it's a marathon rather than a sprint, and negative material comes up, see it as a good thing. Unless you're getting so stressed out, you have to get out of it, sure. But don't be afraid. See its purification. If you can just say it's an object. something had arisen, it will cease. So the language of Anicca helps you to just be very patient with it. And then, over time, whatever time it is, things begin to, you really understand what Nirodha means. You really get a visceral sense of the cessation of suffering happening because you've kind of made the right effort. So, there's some ideas to reflect on. There we go.